Okay, we're gonna get you up closer, Ricky, or are you gonna stay back there?
Well, I'll come up a little bit.
Okay, well, we're in, well, that's sounding strong tonight, so I'm just out there. We are in Walking with Jesus, lesson 17. Jesus attends a wedding, and here is our little timeline. We're going to talk about how to get God's best for your life. And here's our timeline. We're actually right here. Jesus is just 30 years old, just starting his ministry. And we're going to be going through the rest of this book. When we get done with this book, we'll be down here at lesson 31. So that'll kind of give you an idea where we're going to cover basically his first year of ministry in the next 11 lessons. Oh boy, that scares the daylights out of me. I got to get volume 2 going.
I know.
Yeah, it's time to get started. Well, isn't a wedding a fun event to attend? Hopefully you remember good things about your wedding. Have you attended someone else's wedding lately?
No.
When Sylvia and I got married, we had thought about the churches back in the early days of America. Sometimes they couldn't have a preacher there at that church. They'd have a circuit rider. And he'd ride around from church to church to church. So he didn't get there every Sunday. But when he got into the community for Sunday, they'd have church. And sometimes maybe some young couple been kind of courting a little bit. And so at the end of the sermon, he'd say, "Does anybody want to get married?" And we wanted to surprise the church that we were attending, which is kind of funny now that we look back at it. So we talked to the senior pastor. We told him what the game plan was, and he was willing to go along with it. He got the necessary approvals. So they preached that Sunday on marriage, and then at the end of the sermon, he said, "I've been talking about marriage. Maybe somebody would like to get married." And so I grabbed Sylvia's hand, stand up and say, "Yes, we want to get married." And everybody goes, "Yay!" Because they saw it coming, but they didn't know when. Well, for those that were a little more astute, the dead giveaway was a church of 50 had 150 there that day because Sylvia invited all of her friends.
Oh, God.
And they knew why they were coming. It's just the ones that were in the church that didn't know. Anyhow, it stuck. It was fun. It was a good thing. The only challenge is we almost ran out of food.
Pay for the reception.
That'll make you a little nervous. We told the congregation that it was a harvest festival and to bring a salad. And we brought a couple of sandwich trays, but with 150 people, there's just barely enough sandwich on those sandwich trays for everybody to have one sandwich each, and that was about it. So, quite a challenge there, but we made it. We made it through.
That, you know, way back when I got married, we became members of a church just so we could get married in the church and it wouldn't cost us anything. Isn't that horrible? No wonder it was a rocky road.
And your preacher loved you anyhow.
And he did. Matter of fact, he moved to another church, and then when after my divorce, I went to his church. And it was like down the street. I really liked him.
Well, weddings are usually fun events. You notice wedding customs vary in various countries and cultures. What people do here in this country different than and just even within the United States. You go into this community and they do a wedding this way, and you go over to that community and they'll do it. Of course, a lot of times is influenced by their ethnic background or maybe their religious background, but sometimes just the neighborhood they're in.
You know, when my parents got married, my mother was Jewish, my dad was a Gentile, and they got married by a Reformed rabbi.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and after the ceremony, they had to jump on the glass, though.
Oh yeah, okay. Jump on break the glass.
Yep.
Yep. See, that's something that most people don't do in their weddings because they're not from that culture.
Yeah.
Well, tonight we're in John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Jesus and his followers attend a wedding. What does this teach us about how to get God's best for our lives? So, number 1, go where Jesus is. John chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee, and Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. So, Jesus is visiting in Cana of Galilee. It's about 5 miles north of Nazareth, so it's not like it's a long, long ways away. In fact, here's our map. Here's Nazareth right down here, straight east of the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee. And you go up through Sepphoris and through Rumah, and on up the road here, probably up alongside the little river here, up to Cana. And over here is Gennesaret. Up just a little further off the map would be Capernaum. And the Sermon on the Mount was probably preached right about in this area right here, just to kind of help get you things in perspective with one another on that map. We'll get to the Sermon on the Mount in a future lesson. So what does this teach us about how to get the best? Well, Jesus is visiting Cana. Now at this time, remember the last lesson, he recruited 5 disciples. Actually, he recruited, John said, there's the Lamb of God. There was 2 of them. One of them went and brought another one. And then he recruited a second one, and he went out and got his brother. And so there were 5 that we know. Now, whether any of the other apostles were with him for this, disciples, doesn't say. We kind of get the impression he picked the rest of them up or some more up later on. Jesus' presence at a wedding further establishes God's endorsement of the institution of marriage, which has always been the undisputed as the union of one man and one woman for life. This modern notion that same-sex couples can get married is an abomination to the life of Jesus and the teachings of God's Word. It's actually an insult to God. We'll deal with that in a later Walking with Jesus lesson. Have you ever gone to a party and they didn't have enough food or beverage? Like I said, at our wedding, we went to our wedding, we set it up and didn't realize that we didn't have quite enough sandwiches for everybody and salad and just about ran out of food. Oh, terrible. Well, the upside to that was that Sylvia and I were the last ones to go through the food line because we had kind of greet the bride and groom, you know, as they were in line to go get the food. So everybody got to get their food, and then we got there and the trays were like, oh, well, there's a sandwich for you, sandwich for me, we're happy. And that's what we did. But it would have been embarrassing if we had gotten completely out of...
You're going on 19 years, aren't you?
Yeah, it'll be 19 in November.
Wow.
So we're working at it one day at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, in the middle of this wedding, well before the festivities are over, they run out of wine. Now this will be an extremely bad reflection on the groom who hasn't prepared enough for his guests. I guess I'm taking from that evidently the groom was primarily responsible for having enough food and wine and whatever stuff for the wedding reception. Unlike today, a lot of places, at least in America, the father of the bride pays for the wedding.
Yeah.
Well, in a lot of places. That's not absolute. I know some bride and grooms have paid for their own weddings, and some places where maybe...
We pay for our own wedding.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily the case. Of course, if your parents are deceased for some reason, they're not going to be able to pay for anything.
No.
Just send the bill to my parents if you can find them.
This money can filter up.
I don't think that would go over too well. So they run out of wine. How embarrassing to run out of something to drink before the crowd has even started to leave. Now, again, Jewish weddings could last days.
Yeah,
this was not like, okay, we've got the ceremony up with. I've done wedding ceremonies in less than 10 minutes. And very simple, basic ceremony, couple getting married, and it's done, it's over. No special music, no special fanfare, just a simple little walk down the aisle. Do you? Yes, I do. Take this ring, and I pronounce you man and wife, and whoopity, let's go get the honeymoon started. But then I've also done weddings that were, well, definitely longer than 10 or 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. I think our wedding was, I didn't see how long our wedding took. We had some special music in there. We served communion to the congregation while we were partaking communion as husband and wife, and it was just not a 5-minute and we're done, let's go to Hawaii thing. And then of course the reception afterwards, and of course some weddings you go to the wedding, the ceremony's over, you go to over here for the reception, you wait an hour and a half or so, while they're taking pictures and whatever else they're doing. And finally they show up. And then they start serving the food. And of course you always go to the reception because you like to cook food and you want to help celebrate and all that sort of stuff. So that's all fun. But how terrible to run out of something, especially if you go in 2 or 3 days and the first day's not even over and you're running out of wine. What are we going to do? Now, the second thing in how to get God's best for your life. Oh, well, here, wait, before we do that, let's take a look at this. This is the church in Cana, built over the place where the wedding was supposed to have taken place. And this is our friend, and is a minister in Israel that took us around and showed us and helped us get to a lot of these places there. So, how to get God's best for your life? Well, trust His wisdom. John chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." So Mary evidently is involved in serving the food at the feast for the wedding. Maybe she was related to the groom, I don't know, or the bride. But somehow she is there serving, not just being a spectator in the crowd. And she believes that Jesus, when they've got this problem, He can do something about it. Maybe Jesus will run down to the store and buy some more wine. And I mean, we're right here in Cana. They can run around the corner. From where that church is, a very windy, narrow street. It's not a major street. It's a one-way, and somebody come the other way, you're going to have a real traffic problem. It's that windy and narrow of a road. Even pedestrians are almost in jeopardy if a car comes through there. Like a lot of the streets in Jerusalem and a few other places around Israel. But she figures that he'll just run down to the local 7-Eleven or grocery store or whatever's close by, pick up some more wine, bring it up here, situation resolved, and pay back later. And so away they go. No, she doesn't expect Jesus to do what He does. But she challenges Jesus to find a solution to this situation. Now, Jesus addresses His mother as woman instead of mother. This may be a statement that he is now a grown man and I'm not your little boy anymore. That's a possibility. He's now transitioning from being a son to being Lord. Now, she knew that He was Lord from before He was born, from the moment He was conceived. But still, you raise your child and you're used to your child being your child. Did you have a little challenge when your children grew up not being their mommy or their daddy anymore and becoming their adult friend? I know I had a little bit of a challenge with some of that myself.
Mine too.
Had to make a little bit of, I got to retrain my thinker a little here and quit meddling and trying to control and tell them what to do and just let them be themselves.
Although neither one of my children ever called me woman.
My
My daughter sometimes says my first name when she wants to get my attention. But they both call me mom or mother.
my oldest son a few times he called me Glenn, and I'd say, "Excuse me, but I am your dad."
Yeah.
And he respects that. So,
My daughter.
but you know, now I think one thing is very important for us to realize that no matter what the intention behind woman and mother was, it was definitely not in a manner of disrespect. Jesus would not dare treat His mother, or anybody for that matter, in a disrespectful manner, unless they just really, really deserved it. I guess you could say He was disrespectful to the Pharisees and the priests when they tried to tell Him not to do what He was doing.
Always respectful to women.
He was.
He was.
He gave women a little more consideration and regard than any other religion on the face of this earth. So Jesus' reply to His mother reflects that it is not time for Him to do anything miraculous. "My time has not yet come" will be used 4 more times in John's Gospel, and "my time has come" will come later, will later be mentioned 3 times. So there'll be some. I think there was an instant, "Are you going up to Jerusalem for the Feast of the Tabernacles?" I believe it was. And Jesus' reply was, "My time has not come." And so 4 other places in John. And then later on, He'll be getting the apostles ready for His crucifixion. And He'll say, "My time has come. My time has come. My time has come." So Jesus appears to refuse to help His mother with this problem. However, she trusts His ability to do something. So she tells her helpers to do whatever He says. If He said go down to the store and pick up some bottles of wine and hurry back, they would have probably done it. She knows that she can trust her son to find a solution to the situation. Nothing indicates that she's expecting a miracle from it. Now I know there are some people that want to think that Jesus was doing miracles from the time he was knee-high to a grasshopper, but there's no evidence in Scripture to that whatsoever. Even when he was 12 years old, he wasn't doing any miracles in the temple. He was just talking to the people there, discussing with them things that he was learning. He had learned going to rabbinical or Jewish school, that he learned from his mom and his dad, that he learned from the other people in the community, from the rabbis and so forth. And so he was just taking what he had learned. I'm sure he was a good reader. I'm sure he had read the Old Testament from one end to the other more than once. And so he was challenging and questioning them on points of the Mosaical law and points of the Old Testament as they had it at that time. And probably making them think a little bit. Let's see, now how do we answer this person? So he refuses to help her, but she knows that she can trust him. So the next thing then is to obey his commands. Now nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Now the servants, Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." And they did so. So Jesus instructs his helpers to fill 6 water jugs that are nearby with water. Now these would be stone jars, probably holding 20 to 30 gallons of water each. Now water weighs 8 pounds per gallon. Somebody questioned me on that, but the reason I know that is because aviation fuel is 6 pounds to the gallon. And if you get water in your aviation fuel, it goes to the bottom of the tank and you take off, and about the time you get the wings level and the engine starts to suck that water into the engine, you wonder why your airplane isn't running right and whether you're going to be able to land safely or not. And somebody checked me out on it. It was 7.9 something or 8.1, something like that, pounds to the gallon. So roughly. So a 20-gallon container is going to be 160 pounds of water plus the weight of that stone jar. And if it's 30 gallons, that's 240 pounds. That could, plus the weight of the stone jar, could easily be 300 pounds. And you know these guys, they may be pretty healthy and pretty husky, but they're not going to just grab a stone jar, run down to the local creek or over to the local well and just pump about 240 to 300 pounds, 160 to 240 pounds of water in there and just hike it up and hike right back up. It's uphill to that church. It's kind of on the top part of Canaan, not down in the valley. So that, I don't know. I'm sure there are some guys that could do it, pretty brawny, but I'm not one of them. I'm not volunteering for that job. They probably took smaller containers, went down, filled them, and if they had to do a bucket brigade or whatever, until they got those stone jars full. And they filled them. Now, wow, 240 gallons or 160 gallons. I don't know. I'm not a wine drinker, never tried the stuff, so I could not judge this. But I don't know how many people. How many people would 160 gallons of wine take care of? Of course, if they're doing
That's
lower,
a lot of people, though.
that's a lot of people. And if it's 240 gallons of water or wine, either it's a very big party, which is possible, or it went on for a long time, which is also possible. They go out to the community well, fill the jugs. Meanwhile, some of the guests are getting a little thirsty. Now, are they completely out of wine, or are they just getting low on wine? We don't know that. We just kind of, well, I know that we have a crisis pending here. What are we going to do about it? Upon returning, Jesus tells the servants to take some of the wine to the person who's in charge of the feast. So here's the groom. He's appointed one of the best men. Okay, now you make sure we have enough food. You make sure we have enough wine. You make sure everybody's happy. I'm going to make sure my honey's happy. And if I were, at my wedding, I was more interested in my honey. Everybody else had to take care of all the other stuff. They transitioned the church over, set the communion up for the communion time. They made sure the food was set out and the people got through the line and the tables. They took all those chairs out, put the tables up, put the chairs around the table so people would have a place to sit, and they cleaned up afterwards. I didn't have to worry about a thing. They just were more than glad to volunteer to do that. So Jesus tells them to take some of it to the feast. The master of the feast says, wait a minute, wow, this has become very fine wine. So Here is right across the street. Now the street was only from about here to that wall, maybe 10, 15 feet wide. So here's the courtyard to the church. Right across the street is this little souvenir shop. They got a lot of those in Israel. And on the roof of this souvenir shop, behind this fence here to keep the pigeons from putting any more bird paint on the jars, you can see the pigeons have been painting them there a little bit. And you notice when pigeons paint, they don't do a smooth job. It's kind of a little dab here, a little dab there. Well, anyhow, these jars would probably be maybe 10 gallons of water at most. They're rather small. You see, even got handles on them so a couple people can carry them. Not near as big as a 20 or 30 gallon jar would be. I don't believe, anyhow. But they were there. I saw the picture. That was the only thing I could see to look close to a stone water jar, so I took their picture so I could share that with us as we're going through this. Well, reap his blessings. So they've tasted the wine. You've shared the very best for last. This is the first of his miraculous signs in John 9, chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, that Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee, and thus he received his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. And after this he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and he stayed there a few days. So,
Did that get cut off?
yeah, I think there's some that got cut off there. I'm going to have to go back and have a look.
10.
Read verses 9 and 10 for me.
Okay. And the master of the banquet tasted the water, and that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine, after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now."
All right.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, reap his blessings. Normally, the best wine would be served first. And the guests would get a little bit under the influence, and the cheaper wine comes out. They won't care about the inferior quality of wine because their senses are so numb, they don't care much about a whole lot of other things, too. Not so in this situation. The master of the feast comments. Now, is he criticizing or commending? Now, some people would, I guess it's going to depend on, are you positive or negative? You know, if you're positive, you'll say he's commending the servant, the groom for saving the best. And then other people say, you dirty scoundrel, you should have served the best at first, and anybody that left early would have had the best and not the leftovers. But he comments to the groom that the new wine is better than the first. Now, that is not how things are normally done. You know, sometimes breaking the routine is the solution to the problem. Now, the wine that Jesus has just made is better than that which was served first, because Jesus could not do any less than his best. To create a regular wine or an inferior wine is against the nature as God's Son. Now, if any of you are wine connoisseurs and you go to those wine tasting things that some places have, I've never tried that. I'm afraid to get started. I'm afraid I might like it too much and mess up what I have gotten so far down the road without messing up any more that's already messed up. So they say the difference between me and an alcoholic is I never took the first drink.
Good for you.
And I don't want to find out if I'm right or wrong. Some of you have been there, done that, and you're saying that I was a wise man.
You are.
And so I'll give God the glory and thank him that I didn't get there. I know there was at least a couple of times somebody said, "Hey, would you like to try some of my orange juice?"
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
No, thank you. I'm not thirsty.
Hey.
So that's about as close as I got to that. And fortunately, the peer pressure didn't pressure me to do things I'm glad they didn't pressure me to do. Well, Jesus could not give anything less than his best. And this is the first sign that Jesus does to establish who he is as the Son of God. Now, there are greater miracles going to come. This is just kind of like an introductory appetizer, if we will. Just kind of tease the thing a little bit. And he's going to start to distinguish himself now as somebody a little cut above the rest of the crowd. And I think he has a right to do so, considering what we know about the end of the book. Been there, read that, and and we're grateful that he was. Well, our conclusion is that John only records 7 of Jesus' signs. There are others that will be recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John only records 7 of them. All of them are related to Jesus as the Word of Life. And we'll see that theme in the Gospel of John. Well, next week, after the wedding, Jesus goes to Capernaum, where he will reside during most of the next 3 years. He spends more time in Capernaum than any other location, although he's not stuck there. He does get around a bit. His mother and disciples will accompany him, and we will accompany him also as we continue walking with Jesus. And this event took place just before the first Passover, after Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And 3 years from now, Jesus, from this Passover, he will die on the cross for your sins and mine. So his ministry, we could say, lasted just a trickle over 3 years. Right now we're going to stop the camera and go over to our discussion questions.